Surf's up, guys. It's Mauisnake here, and today I'm going to be doing a tier list of the teams that are entering the Blast Fall Finals. This video is powered by Pinnacle, so visit them in the link below. And as you can also see, I am wearing a different set of headphones. This time I am using the Ace Zone headphones, and I'm actually using their microphone as well. So let's get into this one. I'm going to be starting here with the F tier. This is NIP. They have yet to play an official with their 5-man lineup. Their losses aren't actually that bad when you look at who they lost to at CAC, even with a stand-in. They lost a 5 OT game to Faze, where they looked very competitive, actually, and then they lost 2-1 to ENS. And so it's actually not really that bad when you consider the fact they were playing with the stand-in. They probably should do a little bit better, but still outright odds, given that they are supposed to indicate the likelihood that a team is supposed to win the whole tournament, you would probably say that it's pretty unlikely that NIP have a chance to take it all. And that is going to be the sole occupant of the F tier. Next up in the D tier, you are going to be seeing Astralis. And I mean, I was saying pretty early on here, even after Cologne, some people were pretty excited about this new Astralis lineup, but it's pretty clear they don't have the firepower necessary to be true title contenders. I've talked about before the way that I grade different players on different teams. If so-and-so player is your worst player on your roster, do you even have a chance to really win a championship? And when your worst player is kind of hard to decide, I would say, actually, no, it's clearly Borup is the worst player. But if your third and fourth worst players are kind of fighting for the fourth worst spot, it's not really too much of a secret anymore that Astralis are looking towards Yabi and Stown to give them a boost in firepower, and I don't really imagine that they're going to have a strong chance of taking this one down. I'm kind of curious who they're actually going to go with. I think that's the bigger narrative for Astralis for me. Is it going to be Buzz? Is it going to be Stare? I'd probably go with Buzz just slightly, but I think that maybe depending on how the comms are behind the scenes, you might opt for someone like Stare over Buzz. But I also don't know how the roles are going to really shake up when it goes to Yabi and Stown, because then you have a few guys that really want to be in the action. Like, Yabi can take the lurk spots away, but then I really wish they would have just gone for Shush, personally. And I'm going to talk about Shush right now. I'm going to talk about Heroic, because they are still a team that is in the D tier for me. Cadian has yet to play an official on CS2 at this point. This team actually was looking okay online. Dupree was really showing off. He had a 1.25 rating in all of his online matches since he joined Heroic. And so it's pretty clear that one guy came in with the right idea when he joined this roster. But for the rest of this team, I would say that they're in too much of turmoil to have a great chance at winning this one. The subplot for me is who's going to do better between Astralis and Heroic, and it would just be simply funny if Heroic does do better than Astralis, given that Astralis is trying to poach Heroic players, or they are in the process of doing so. Okay, we're going to move up to the C tier here, and this is a team that has lost a little bit of steam overall. It is Complexity. They didn't do that well in the Thunderpick World Championship, where they got donked on, and then they got owned by Maus as well. Sydney gives me a little bit of hope that they can be competitive, and I also just saw Floppy and Grim in the lobby here. We're all in the same hotel right now, and they were eating pizza. They were having a good time. Looks like their spirits are in order, but that just could be the fact that I light up every room that I enter, and I put a smile on everybody's face. So hard to say with Complexity. I do think that they're a little bit of a dark horse to go deep. Whether they're going to win this tournament is another story. But given how close they played Faze at Sydney in that grand final, if they actually were able to progress maybe away from the officials, I actually think that this team is a really, really solid chance of being a dark horse, especially given the fact that, tactically speaking, they're probably one of the strongest teams on Anubis right now. So that should always be in their back pocket for this event. Tied with them for outright odds is Na'Vi. We have obviously yet to see Wonderful play with this team. I'm pretty high on this roster in terms of the potential here. I'm still not really too sure, though, about Ema and his fit on the team. He did look a little bit better in some of the later tournaments with this team. With Simple leaving, I actually don't think that's too bad, because Simple was kind of trolling in some of the games for Na'Vi. And so if you think that, oh, they lost Simple, they have no chance, maybe take a step back for just a second, because if you really watch Simple in some of those events, yes, he put up some good ratings, but he started really kind of trolling with the auto shotgun. He started playing a lot of close angles, not really opping as much as you would have expected him to, or using more meta guns. That being said, the XM is pretty good as a weapon in CS2, so maybe he was ahead of the curve in some regard. But I also think that if I want to just touch on Simple and where he might be going, I don't really think he is going to be joining Valorant, as Richard has said on my podcast before. I think it's more likely that he's taken a step away, he's reevaluating his life, trying to put some things in order. And if he plays CS2 now, the latest update, the op is better. The op is literally just better now. And I think all of the hubbub earlier on and the worry for a lot of oppers that maybe the op's not going to be as big of a thing in this game because of the economy, I think that was also due in part because the op was legitimately worse. They updated that thing with the shot fires not, it's kind of like the last frame as opposed to the first frame. I don't know, subtick still seems a little bit broken to me overall, but it does, the op does feel a lot better now if you guys have been playing and been flicking a lot. So that's worth including in this. Another thing about Na'Vi is that Thorin, throughout the hot take on one of the most recent episodes of Hot Take Point, made that Na'Vi would make it to a grand finals, not win it, but just have a finals berth in their first 2 LAN events, which means that it's got to be either here or the World Finals. And the team that has to do a little bit better than them in this group to try to, I guess, push Thorn's prediction down is this team, Cloud9. Cloud9 have been really interesting lately. Obviously, they have brought in Boomich. They've lost Shiro. They have 6.3x odds. They are still in the C tier for what Pinnacle is ranking them in, and in my eyes as well. But for me, actually, I'd probably put them kind of like in a C plus or maybe even a B minus right now. The main concern about Cloud9 is they don't have a dedicated opper. I think that there needs to be a distinguishment right now, because some people are saying that it's Perfecto, and when I was taking some glances at this team, I thought it was Perfecto also. Looking back at these games actually a little bit closer as I was preparing for this event, Boomich is opping as well. They are both opping. Perfecto and Boomich have been opping, and Boomich has been opping more on Overpass and Anubis, and it's been Perfecto that's kind of been opping on Ancient, Inferno, Vertigo, and I haven't really seen enough of the other maps to make a strong call on those ones. But I think that this is not a long-term fix. Your primary opper should be your primary opper, period. And I will say that this team is actually looking pretty solid. I think that I would probably myself put them a little bit higher. Like I probably would, yeah, like I said, B minus tier is more where I would see them, as opposed to maybe like a flat C tier like Cloud9 and Na'Vi. Because if we're talking about all the teams right now and where they stack up with each other, I've talked about this on Hot Take Point Made, and this is just my take, is that Faze is the best team in the world. No doubts about that. Maus is the second best team in the world. I don't have any doubts about that. The third best team in the world is very much so up for grabs. We haven't seen a lot from some of the other tier 1 teams that we really think should be punching up there, like Vitality, who have just made a player swap, like G2, who are in the middle of swapping things out, and now JKS is reportedly benched, so we don't really know about him either. To me, VP is the third best team in terms of verifiable results, but there's actually an argument that Cloud9 is the third best team also. Because Cloud9 has actually beaten VP, I've just seen more VP beating lower tier teams regularly, and that's why I would more safely want to put VP as the third best team right now. But there's really a strong case, given that VP lost to Cloud9 in a BO3, that Cloud9 could be the third best team in the world right now, which means in turn that this next outright odd for Vitality, which Pinnacle would probably put in the B tier, might be a little bit fraudulent just because we don't know anything about Vitality. And this odd has been updated and mid-made given the fact that they are going to be using Mezi. I think that this is just a solid downgrade for Vitality, unfortunately. I think that Mezi is an above-average Tier 1 professional player. He is not the same sort of anchor where I would put Magisk this year as a top 20 player in the world. To me, Mezi was about the 35th or 36th best player this year. And so for him to fill in all the roles of Magisk, there's reason to believe that he's going to be able to do that comfortably because he's played many of those positions before, but I don't think that he's going to be as good one-to-one. There's just been a few too many games here and there where Mezi just kind of falls off a cliff, whereas to me, Magisk's floor was so high. And people and Mezi sometimes had a pretty high ceiling that he showed from time to time in his tenure with Fnatic, but there were also very often games where he just kind of fell off of a cliff for me, where he just had no impact, and that seemed like it came for a multitude of reasons. Could have been the calling style, so maybe when he's playing on this team he can be a little bit better, but I would say that Magisk was so much more consistently reliable than Mezi was, and so I wouldn't really give Vitality a strong chance to, as strong of these odds to win the event. It's possible. They're probably probably the third most likely team for me, but I would actually personally say Cloud9 is a little bit more likely than Vitality, given what I've seen, and I just haven't really seen enough with Vitality. So this is going to be an interesting event in terms of we're going to find out a lot very quickly about how competitive this Vitality roster is, given the fact that they've lost a guy who's been such a solid overall anchor for them. And I feel like the only team that should even be in the A tier, in fact, I would just skip the A tier entirely, put them in the S tier, is, of course, Faze. They are on a 15-series win streak at present. They have been so dominant when it comes to CS2. They've had some close games, obviously. They've had to make some good comebacks, but Rops has been a phenomenal player. You would consider him the best rifler in the world right now when it comes to CS2. I think we have yet to see all of these top-tier teams play enough to really say for certain if they were all to play in a 32-team tournament, who is going to be the best overall player for certain. But with everything that we have seen, which is basically what we have to go off of, Rops has been the best player for CS2. And generally speaking, that's how I work with these things. If we haven't seen anything, I'm not going to go off of suppositions too much so, where you would probably, which is why I kind of feel like that rating or those odds for Vitality maybe are a little bit too high for me. I feel like I wouldn't be confident having those kinds of odds for Vitality. But for FaZe, this is a team that for certain you would expect to make it to the grand finals. They're almost surely going to win their first round matchup versus NIP. I think they're almost surely going to make it out of Group A as the #1 seeded team. And then if they're going to play a #2 seeded team from Group B, that's either Vitality, Complexity, Heroic, or Astralis, and I think they've got all those teams' numbers. Complexity probably would be the closest bout, unless Vitality has something cooking up their sleeve in terms of how well Mezzi has been integrated, how good Zywoo actually is at this game. But in Sydney, Zywoo looked kind of pedestrian to me. He wasn't the superstar that he has been for the rest of the year. And so for me, it's pretty easy to say FaZe is the safest bet to be the team that wins this whole thing. Obviously, please bet responsibly if you do decide to bet with Pinnacle. Other than that, though, as always, being toxic is a choice.